goody bark. No, say now, where do I start? I said love comes naturally. Yeah, comes naturally.
Okay, so once again, thank you all for being here today. So great that you're all joining us. We're always grateful for everybody who joins us at the Sunday gathering, and happy to be here talking with you today. Okay, so the title of my talk today is Let There Be the Light of Hanukkah, because today is the third day of Hanukkah. And those of you who've been around Community Miracle Center for a while know that we are very ecumenical here, and we celebrate all the major holidays. And I've always really had an affinity for Hanukkah. I love the Hanukkah holiday, and I love what it represents. So part of the tradition of Hanukkah is that you always tell the story of Hanukkah. So I'm going to tell the story of Hanukkah. I'll tell an abbreviated version, but I'll tell an abbreviated version of the story of Hanukkah. So the Hanukkah miracle, as it is called, took place about 2 centuries BCE, which means before the Common Era, which means 2 centuries before the birth of Jesus. And we started counting years as 1, 2, 3, 4. So in that time, in the 2nd century BCE, the Jewish people and the Jewish faith was different than it is now. And they celebrated at just one temple. There was just one temple that was the center of the Jewish faith. And there were certain rites and sacraments and rituals that could only be performed in that temple by the priesthood who served that temple. Now, in the other villages and cities around the area, there were smaller community centers, the synagogues, and certain things could be done in the synagogues, but certain rites and sacraments had to be done in that one temple in Jerusalem by the priesthood. So every Jewish person was supposed to, at some time in their life, make a pilgrimage and go to Jerusalem to have these sacraments performed. So this one temple, which served as the center for the Jewish faith in Jerusalem, was obviously very, very important. So in 168 BCE, the Syrians invaded Jerusalem, and there was a bloody military battle, and thousands of people were killed, and the Syrians took over the temple. And when they took over the temple, they erected statues to their god, who was Zeus. And this was considered really blasphemous by the Jewish people, in that this had actually defiled the temple. So the Jewish people organized their own resistance and military uprising under the leadership of Judas Maccabee. And in a 4-year siege, took 4 years, they eventually drove the Syrians out of the temple. And they drove the Syrians out of the temple, and they reclaimed the temple. Now, one of the things about the Jewish temple was that there was a lamp, a menorah, a large menorah in the Jewish temple, and that lamp was always burning at the altar, and it symbolizes the eternal light that's always within us, always burning. And that lamp burned a sacred oil that was consecrated and made holy and purified, and it was an 8-day ritual to sanctify that oil. And there was only enough sacred oil available to allow the lamp to burn for a day. So the Jewish elders had to decide whether they wanted to light the lamp and potentially have it go out, because they only had enough oil for it to burn for a day, and it would take them 8 days before they could purify more oil, or just wait until they had purified the more oil. So after the debate, it was decided that they would light the lamp. And so they lit the lamp. And the miracle was the light did not go out, even though there was only oil and fuel to burn the light for 1 day. The light lasted, the flame lasted for the 8 days until new oil was available. And so that is what we celebrate when we celebrate Hanukkah, we celebrate the miracle of the lights. And it's always called the miracle of the lights, that the light burned bright for 8 days. And that's why we have a menorah. So that's what I was doing here a moment ago. I was lighting the menorah. So here's the menorah. It's day 3. Those are the 3 candles in front. And you add a candle for each day. And the shamash, which is the candle that's a little higher, that's the candle you use to light the other candles. And you say a particular prayer if you're a Jewish person when you light the candles. And I will say that prayer. And it's, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to kindle the Hanukkah lights. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who performed miracles for our forefathers in those days and at this time. So that is the story, and it's important to tell the story. And I want to say why. Okay, because the Jewish people were for a long time persecuted, and they had to leave their home territory, and they were actually forbidden from the practice of their religion. And when you can't practice your cultural heritage, it's a deep psychic wound. So when you can't do the normal things that you feel are important for you to do, it's a form of psychic oppression. And so it's important to reclaim that at some point. And this has been important to all oppressed people. Think about the Native American culture and how once they again were regaining their rights, how important it was for them to have rituals and powwows and chantings and dances that were the ones they had always traditionally performed, because it heals that psychic wound. And that's important for us. It's important for Jewish people. That's why you always tell the Hanukkah story when you celebrate Hanukkah. And we see that going on now. And I think it's an important message for us now, because in a lot of ways, our normal ways we celebrate this holiday season, we're not going to be able to do this year. I mean, let's face it, holidays are a celebration of visits and parties, and a lot of that isn't going to happen this year. So I think it's important for us to find ways to celebrate the holidays and not to allow our cultural heritage to, fade away, because it's a form of psychic oppression and it does lead to depression. So I think it's important for us to be channels of the light and the joy, and to the best of our ability, find ways to celebrate our culture and the holidays with those who we love. Okay, in the past, I've spent a lot of time talking about Hanukkah and the lamp and the light. And, there's really wonderful imagery here and wonderful metaphors. For one, the Jewish elders did not buy into the appearance of lack. So there was an appearance of lack, didn't have enough oil. So do you acknowledge that as the truth, or do you light the lamp anyway? So they lit the lamp anyway, and then the miracle happened. And that's great. And the eternal light that's always in our altar, that's great. But I'd like to talk about something else today too, that I haven't focused on in the past, and that's the importance of the temple. So this, this lamp and this light was in their temple. And as I said earlier when I was telling you the story, the temple was very important to them. And I think it's our temples are very important to us as well. And, there's a lot of ways you can talk about the temple, but let's just start with basics. The temple was a physical structure. The temple was a large building complex in the middle of Jerusalem. So the temple was a building. The temple was physical. So they reclaimed the temple. So first and foremost, they reclaimed the physical building. So what's, the temple for us? Course in Miracles actually says, and it was in that reading that Reverend Kim read, that when properly perceived, the body is our temple. Most people don't like to think this. Most people like to skip over this, not really about the body being the temple, is it? Well, it kind of is. So let's read that quotation that Reverend Kim read. It says the ego's temple, the body, thus becomes the temple of the Holy Spirit, where devotion to him replaces devotion to the ego. In this sense, the body does become a temple to God because his voice abides in it by directing the use to which it is put. So for all those people who think A Course in Miracles is about moving away from our bodily identity, well, maybe it is, but we move away from it after we have reclaimed it and rededicated it and resanctified it and made it the temple of the Holy Spirit. As A Course of Love might call it, we may have to make it the elevated self of form. You have to make it the elevated self of form first before you can transcend it. So there's a hierarchy here. And I think this is a subtle message that gets missed. So in many ways, we've probably defiled our body. And, I do think it's important to expand the idea of body. So, the physical body is defiled when it's ill, when it's sick, when it's not functioning right. But we have other bodies. We have the body of our financial affairs and our business affairs. How's that doing? Is that healthy and well, or does that need to be reclaimed and resanctified? We have the body of our relationships, all the relationships that we have with people. How are they doing? Are they peaceful and loving? If not, they've been defiled and they have to be reclaimed. Those temples have to be part of a reclamation process. And I think it's important for us to understand that we're not going to really have any real healing just by ignoring the manifestation of sick bodies, sick finances, and sick relationships. Those things all have to be healed at their own level before we can transcend them and we can go beyond them. And those of you who know me and have listened to me for a while know that I actually relate to the entire world, the entire physical universe as my body, because the entire physical universe is a symbolic representation of myself. And so it's me, it's my body. My self is manifesting the entire physical universe. And this is where I usually lose people. So if I'm losing you right now, I understand, because I usually lose people around this point. But, just hang there with me here just for a little bit. It's a very central teaching to A Course in Miracles that there actually is no world. There is no world. There's no objective world. It's all a projection from our minds. There's no objective reality. It's all a subjective experience that we have. So just a couple of quotes from A Course in Miracles. He does not realize he makes the world, for there is no world outside of him. That's from the text. I've not had a lot in common with the well-known miracle teacher, Ken Wapnick, as probably a lot of you know, but he was really good about one thing. He continually stressed that there was no world and that you really couldn't get the A Course in Miracles theology or doctrine or teaching if you held on to the idea that there was an external reality that somehow had truth and reality to it. There is no world. And here's another one. There is no world apart from what you wish, and herein lies your ultimate release. We're never going to be released. We're never going to be healed if we think there is an objective reality out there. If we think there's a world out there. One more thought. There is no world. This is the central thought the Course attempts to teach. So those of you who are trying to maintain yourselves as good Course in Miracles students, but you're also trying to hold on to the belief that there's an external reality out there, yeah, good luck with that. I don't think that works real well. It's very hard, impossible, to be in A Course in Miracles student and have healing through this discipline if you're holding on to the belief that there's an external world with external truths, with external science, or whatever you want to call it, that makes things happen the way they happen. There are no laws but God. It's all made up in our own minds. Science is made up in our own minds. Now, ultimately, once you can embrace that, and once you can get that, well, since there is no world and it's all a projection of my mind, so if I've got a sick body, a sick physical body, or a sick body of my financial affairs, or a sick body of my relationships, or a sick body of the world, it's because of how I'm thinking. So if I have to reclaim the temple, I'm going to have to change my thinking. And, it's pretty absolute about this, of Course in Miracles says. I mean, we're going to have to change our thinking so much that our whole personality is going to be fluid. I got that guidance this week, too, and it's important to me. So if we're trying to have healing in our lives, we cannot heal and keep our current personality. We're going to have to be willing to let go of our personality. And people are very attached to their personalities. But healing means you let go of all that and you just allow the Holy Spirit to flow through you, and your personality becomes malleable or fluid. As a matter of fact, I think you actually lose your personality. You might have, in other people's eyes, the personality that they're projecting onto you, but your personality is just their projection onto you. It's not actually who you are. We're going to have a reclamation of the temple, that's our body. We're going to have a reclamation of the actual temple, which is our minds. So A Course in Miracles does get to that. And it says it very clearly in this particular quotation. It says, both the separation and the fear are miscreations of the mind, which must be undone. That is what is meant by the restoration of the temple. So it's very, very clear. Restoring the temple, reclaiming the temple means that we undo the separation, we undo the miscreations, and we don't live in fear. Course in Miracles says no one who lives in fear is really alive. No one who lives in fear is really alive. There's a lot of people out there living in a whole lot of fear right now. A lot of people living in fear of a disease, a virus. There's a lot of people living in fear of the political process. There's a lot of people living in fear that somehow President Trump isn't going to leave office and we're going to have President Trump for 4 more years. There's a lot of people living in fear that Joe Biden is going to become president, and then we're going to have Joe Biden and, the so-called swamp for another 4 years. So whatever way your fear manifests, it manifests on both sides. You're living in that fear, you're not really alive. And the restoration of the temple is turning those fears over to the Holy Spirit and being led, just being led. We will be led on how to deal with the world, how to deal with the political process, how to deal with the pandemic in ways that don't strip us of our cultural connection, but allow us to be this person without a personality that the light can just flow through, and that's all balanced and arranged by the Holy Spirit. We don't have to really plan for it. It will just happen through us when we really do what A Course in Miracles tells us to do. So, as again, many of you know, I in my own past have had periods of great anxiety, family characteristic, whatever. There's a lot of worldly reasons why, but there is no world. So why is? I guess I came here to heal that. I don't have to despair because of that. It's not my job to be without that. It was my job to heal that and offer that as a healing to all my sisters, brothers, and others. And I have healed that, and it's great. And I remember that when I'm in a state of heightened anxiety, it's not really living. It's surviving, maybe, but you don't even feel like you want to survive. It's a pretty sad way to live. And then that's what it becomes. It becomes depression. You deal with anxiety long enough, and you just end up getting depressed. So we need to let go of that. And I do like to mention that in my own issues and my own problems, because people do seem to connect with that. As I was talking about last week, I've been interviewed lately, and those interviews have now been broadcast and are out there. So one of the interviews was on A Course in Miracles TV with Robin Duncan, and that interview is now available. And she asked me, and we talked a lot about my bouts with mental illness and high anxiety and depression. And true to form, a lot of people connected with that, and we're really grateful that I talked about that. So I just put it out there. And one of the things that I didn't talk about at that time, but I'll talk about now, I just mentioned it, is when you're in those states of anxiety, it's not really like living. That's not really life. And that's not the life that Jesus or the Holy Spirit wants us to live. That's a defiled temple. And that's a temple that has to be restored. And that's a temple that has to be reclaimed. And we always have enough fuel to do that, regardless of how it may appear. And Hanukkah, what we're in right now, is always a great reminder of that. Here, let's look at this again. Let there be the light of Hanukkah, and let you be the light of Hanukkah. We are the light of Hanukkah. We are the lamp that never will go out if we're just willing to light our light. We have to be willing to restore our temples, our bodies, our finances, our relationships, and the world. There's a defilement going on in the world right now. You know, this virus and the shutdown and and the shelter in place and the unemployment and the depression. I mean, this is not world functioning like it should be functioning. We need to be part of the healing of that. And all of us will be guided how to do that, but we have to light the lamp and start moving and not believing in the lack. And it's going to be a challenge, and it's a challenge for many this holiday season to be able to step forth and find ways to celebrate and to find the energy and the joy to celebrate. But I have, and I am, and I feel really good about it. So, no despair is going to darken my joy of Christmas. I am going to move forward and be the light. Here's a quote that I really like. It's very appropriate for Hanukkah because it talks about the lamps. It says, because the miracle worker has heard the Holy Spirit, the miracle worker strengthens the Holy Spirit's voice in a sick brother by weakening the sick brother's belief in sickness, which the miracle worker does not share. The power of one mind can shine into another because all the lamps of God were lit by the same spark. It is everywhere and it is eternal. So that's what our job is every day, but especially during the holiday season, and especially maybe as we go about the next couple of weeks and we hear people saying something that's a little down. A lot of people get down for the holidays. Depression during the holidays is a real thing. And my guess is it's going to be, even more prominent this year for many people. So let's be the lamp. Let's restore this temple. Let's bring some joy to people. And that's our job. The miracle worker shares his light, lights the other person's lamp, and encourages them to shine and burn forth brightly. Because all the lamps of God are lit by the same spark, we can light their lamp. The light is eternal. It is not going out. The temple may need to be restored, but we can restore it. We are restoring it. It is our job to restore it. And if we just step forward, not believing in the lack, and certainly not believing that the lack can somehow take our joy away from us, we can claim what we can of our usual cultural heritages and maybe expand them in some way. Let there be the light of Hanukkah, and let us all be that light of Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah! Thank you very much.
God told Noah, build me an ark, build it out of hickory bark. Noah said, now, where do I start? I said, Lord,